Gold Panner's Basin, Rolling Stone Town. Spring. A robin, with blue feathers on its back and yellow fluff on its chest, flapped its wings and flew up from the lawn in front of the town hall, crossing several chimneys and brick-red roofs. It skillfully landed on an oak tree enclosed by many red and yellow walls. Just below, there were bugs crawling on the branch. The robin was about to pounce. But suddenly a roar came from the translucent window behind it. The bug quickly shook off the branch. The bird also flew away in a panic. Only the 5 well-dressed humans behind the second-floor window continued to argue. I disagree. The plump middle-aged woman, Liz, slapped the Outstanding Citizen Award plaque in front of her, then turned her full firepower to the bald man on her left. Howard is nothing but a scoundrel, a scum. Not only does he like to hook up with married women, he also loves to hook up with married men. He always takes advantage of the women's shopping trips to find their men. I've seen it dozens of times with my own eyes. Dozens of times. Liz became more and more agitated as she spoke, spitting out half a table of saliva. The 4 seated men all involuntarily shrank back. Calm down, Liz, the bald man tried to soothe her. This is just a nomination. Liz was adamant. Even nomination is not acceptable. Howard is terrible. With that, her slender eyes looked around, as if she had discovered something. None of you have been seduced by him, have you? The 4 men shivered and denied in unison, no. The bald man even tore the recommendation letter in his hand to shreds. The committee unanimously rejects the nomination of Howard Rose. Anyone who had worked in the town hall for more than a week knew how terrible Liz's mouth was. She was a walking gossip. If one was unlucky enough to be included in her gossip, the whole town would know about the rumor by tomorrow morning. Everyone present was a respectable person. They couldn't bear such slander. So, the last nominated candidate, Mr. Matthew from the Mage District. No surname mentioned. He has just completed 2.5 years of residency in Rolling Stone Town. Meeting the Outstanding Citizen Award criteria. His daytime job is a history teacher at Siffel Public School, and the students all love him. He also has a part-time job at the security office, and Captain Brad of the security office speaks highly of him. According to the nominator's description, Mr. Matthew is kind-hearted and enthusiastic. He doesn't have many friends in Rolling Stone Town and always keeps to himself. The reason for this is that he is too busy to make friends. The bald man hadn't finished speaking. A gentleman to Liz's left raised an objection. Mr. Chairman, a loner does not meet the Outstanding Citizen Award criteria. The bald man nodded slightly. Don't rush, Richard. The nominator claims that our Mr. Matthew has planted nearly 1,000 oak trees in Rolling Stone Town in the past 2.5 years, greatly greening the town's environment. Look, that oak tree outside the window, and the 3 in front of the town hall, are all thanks to Mr. Matthew. In addition to Captain Brad's statement from the security office, the nominator believes that Mr. Matthew has made an indelible contribution to the security and environment of Rolling Stone Town and deserves this year's Outstanding Citizen Award. Everyone listened. They all looked out the window. Was this tree planted just 2 years ago? I feel like it's always been here, Richard, dressed as a gentleman, muttered. It seems so, I remember. Matthew, a tall, somewhat handsome, somewhat shy young man. Liz showed a reminiscent look. This is indeed a significant contribution. Another man reminded, but whether he can get along with other citizens is the most important criterion for the selection. The bald man nodded. Usually, that would be the case, but the author of this recommendation letter doesn't seem to write anonymous letters often. She accidentally appended her name at the end. Richard clapped his hands. Recommendation violation. Direct rejection. Well, Rolling Stone Town still doesn't have any outstanding citizens who can even be nominated this year, just like the past 3 years. The others shrugged or spread their hands, all accepting this result. But just then, the bald man said again, the author is Sif. Blood Flag. Blood Flag. It's the surname of the Lord of Rolling Stone Town, Sif. Blood Flag is the pampered only daughter of the Lord of Rolling Stone Town. The room went quiet for 2 or 3 seconds. Even the most critical Liz raised both hands. Skip the nomination process. I support Matthew as an outstanding citizen. The others seconded one after another. However, the bald man hadn't finished speaking. He slowly pulled out an old piece of parchment from the bottom of the pile of documents. There's one last issue. This is the registration form Matthew submitted to the city 2 years ago, which clearly states his origin and adventurer profession. I wonder if he wrote it wrong at the time, based on my observation. What he has done in Rolling Stone Town these years has nothing to do with his adventurer profession. And even contradicts it. But if what is registered on this paper is true, he might miss our generous Outstanding Citizen Award. What profession? Isn't he just a regular mage? Everyone curiously leaned in to look. What first caught their eye was a beaming sketch photo, and in the profession column below it clearly read, Necromancer. Wow, someone exaggeratedly exclaimed. If he is a necromancer, then it's definitely not possible. I remember the Lord hates necromancers the most, Richard said seriously, but this might be a misunderstanding. Let's do this. I'll go talk to Matthew after work. The bald man nodded. Then I'll leave it to you. And by the way, do the assessment work too? To be honest, I don't believe it. Where is there a necromancer who plants trees every day? Evening, north of Rolling Stone Town. I and the newly formed oak forest. A tall figure was busy. Matthew held a shovel, skillfully filling a thin layer of ripe soil into the freshly dug hole. On the ground next to him were a few small hemp bags, one of which contained tree seedlings, the rest were empty. The next moment that he planted the seedling in the hole, covering it with several layers of different textured soil. After transplantation, Matthew took out a bottle of green liquid and poured it onto the soil near the seedling. A wave of pale green light surged. It was clearly visible that the seedling had grown a lot. Its posture also became more robust. Successfully planted an oak tree, your affinity with nature has slightly increased. Cumulative number of oak trees planted and survived, 996. Only 4 more to go, it'll definitely be enough tomorrow. Looking at the sky, Matthew decided to return home for rest. As usual, he also checked the contents of the taskbar again. Main task, planting trees. Description: choose a type of tree to plant on a large scale around Rolling Stone Town. Please ensure the survival rate of this task. Time is unlimited. Initial goal, 1000 trees. Primary reward, necromancy, bone dragon, and a large amount of XP. Ignoring the reward, this task would be perfectly normal if it were given to a druid, but the problem is, Matthew was very sure that he was a bona fide necromancer. Just like that. It's clearly written on the character panel. Name, Matthew. Profession, level 5 necromancer. Attributes: strength 10/agility 14/constitution 11/intelligence 15/perception 15/charisma 16. Features: necromancer/harvest of fear. Abilities: casting/scrolls/common knowledge, necromancy and magic, /insight/medicine/nature's gift/summon undead creatures. Contract: 1/3, /mastery of putrefaction spells. Abridged: I shouldn't have been dual logging to grind monsters. Looking at this hodgepodge yet seemingly legit game system, Matthew felt a mixture of emotions. He clearly remembered that on the eve of his transmigration, he was dual logging on his computer to grind swamp mud monsters in the corrupted forest. The professions of his two characters were druid and necromancer. The next second, he transmigrated and became a necromancer. Subsequently, Matthew discovered something even more baffling. After transmigration, he had a game system, but there seemed to be a slight problem with the system. And the game he played, the system names were different for different professions. The necromancer's was called Path of the Undying, the druid's was called Heart of Nature, and Matthew's system name was a pile of overlapping gibberish. Ignoring the gibberish, he could barely see the words undying and nature, but these two words were overlaid with countless watermarks of the other. Looking at it for a second longer would make one dizzy. Matthew was stupefied at the time. Fortunately, the system stabilized quickly and also gave him the first main task, that was to plant trees in Rolling Stone Town. Being new and friendless, Matthew had no reason to refuse. So he diligently got down to work, and he did so for almost 3 years. Mage District. Outside an elegant old 2-story house, Matthew, who had just returned home, stopped. He did not immediately open the gate. Instead, he looked at the alley opposite. Someone was waiting for him. Mr. Matthew. A youthful girl ran out of the alley. Her 2 guards hesitated for a moment, not moving. The pretty-faced girl jogged up to Matthew. Even though it was already dark, Matthew could still clearly see the deep blush on her face. Bina. Matthew responded. Matthew, I'll be setting off for the Jade Green Court next week. My father wants me to learn dance and art. I came to see you before leaving. The girl's brow and eyes lowered. Matthew nodded. The Jade Green Court is a good place. Seeing the girl's lack of response, he added, the Wood Elves are good at singing and dancing, their artistic taste is indeed superior to humans. The girl still kept her head down. Matthew had to say, remember to write to me when you go to the Jade Green Court, so I can reply to you. There was finally a spark in the girl's eyes. She lifted her head slightly, her big eyes were full of anticipation. I will. Matthew, before I leave, can you hug me? Matthew hesitated. I'm afraid that's not appropriate. The girl had already embraced him proactively, her soft body pressed against Matthew's chest. He could feel her rapid heartbeat. I like you, Matthew. Bina bravely confessed. Matthew let her hug for a moment, then gently pushed her away, and then he reminded her kindly, Bina, you're still young, you don't understand what it really means to like someone. Even if you do, you're only seeing my surface, you don't understand the real me. Bina passionately retorted, I understand you. I've been secretly watching you every day in class. I know everything you do. You're a good person. You love plants and life so much. There's no better man in Rolling Stone Town than you. Regarding this point of view, I reserve my opinion. I'm sorry to disturb you, but official business is important. A man's voice suddenly came from the other side of the house. Bina immediately blushed. She quickly hid behind Matthew. Then, Matthew saw a gentlemanly dressed man walking quickly towards him. Mr. Matthew, I am Richard from the 5-person committee of the City Hall. Regarding the selection of outstanding citizens, there is an urgent piece of information that needs your confirmation. This is the information you registered at the City Hall 2 years ago. Is this your profession? Is there any error? Matthew glanced at the document handed over by Richard, and then he said with extraordinary determination, no error. As you can see, I am indeed a necromancer. Richard was taken aback. This is illogical, you don't seem like a necromancer. Bina also huffed, I don't believe it. You must be making it up. Matthew's face was calm. The next moment that he suddenly snapped his fingers towards his house. Not long after, the kitchen door was pushed open from the inside. A tall shadow walked out and came to the garden outside. Richard and Bina's eyes widened. It was a 2-meter-tall minotaur skeleton. As it walked, the skeleton greeted, "Hey. Matthew, do we have rare guests tonight?" Matthew shook his head. "I don't think so." He looked at the stunned Bina and Richard. "I'm sorry to have frightened you, but I must say, it seems that you neither understand me nor necromancers. Good night, see you, both of you." Night. The strong aroma of mushroom soup filled the dining room and kitchen. Matthew and the minotaur skeleton sat opposite each other enjoying dinner. "What a pity, Matthew," the skeleton regretted. "You really shouldn't have let me show my face. This time, you not only lost the selection of outstanding citizens, but you may also lose the admiration of a pure girl. No matter how you calculate it, it's a loss." Matthew took a sip of mushroom soup, his expression satisfied. "I don't care." The skeleton asked with interest, "So what do you care about?" "It's phased. For now, I just want to plant trees." Snap. Matthew gently put down the bowl. "Peggy, prepare the seedlings I need for tomorrow in the greenhouse. I'm going to meditate in the basement." The skeleton complained. "Why do I have to go again? I've been working continuously for 72 hours. I even made the loving dinner just now. I'm so tired." Matthew responded calmly. "You're a skeleton, Peggy, you won't get tired. Also, you're the only summoned creature I have a contract with. I don't trust other skeletons to do things." Peggy had no choice but to accept. She grumbled and walked into the greenhouse on the east side. "Damn Necromancer. Necromancer just wants to plant trees." Part 1, Mark of the Dead 002, Necromantic Summoning, Bone Dragon. The next day, Matthew rose early. Today was a Saturday. He didn't need to go to Westford Public School during the day. It was a perfect opportunity to complete the last task requirement. He hurriedly left the house with several bags of saplings from the greenhouse. Peggy was indeed meticulous in her work. In addition to everything needed for planting, she had also placed a lunch box and a water bag next to the bags of saplings on the shelf. This indicated that not only had she guessed that Matthew was going to have a big day today, but also that he would most likely forget to take food from the kitchen. This level of care was a miracle for a low-level undead. Sometimes Matthew felt that it wouldn't be a bad idea to let Peggy replace him in planting trees, but he only thought about it. Although Rolling Stone Town was not a remote place devoid of magic and necromancers in the world of Einduo were far from being universally hated, a walking skeleton would still attract many strange looks, not to mention that Peggy was a rare skeleton transformed from a deceased minotaur. The story of a skeleton planting trees would undoubtedly cause a lot of controversy in a small place like Rolling Stone Town. Just thinking about it made him feel troublesome. North of the oak forest, Matthew was steadily surveying the land in front of him. He was choosing a location for the saplings. Planting trees was never an easy task. Choosing seeds, germination, base soil configuration, greenhouse planting, tree pit location, transplanting and maintenance. Matthew had become very familiar with the series of steps over the past 3 years, but in practice, there were always various problems to be solved. For example, right now, Matthew had already prepared the saplings and tools, but he couldn't start work due to the difficulty of choosing a location. Rolling Stone Town is really not a good place for planting trees. Looking at the rolling black smoke drifting from the west, Matthew lamented. The Gold Digger Basin was famous for its various mines, and the land here, both above and below ground, had been dug up by humans and gnolls several times, making most of it unsuitable for plant growth. Pollution caused by humans was one thing. What was even more terrifying was that big scar to the north. Matthew stood on a high mound and looked north. "It's getting closer." He looked at the black scar that was constantly spreading from the north with a complicated expression. That was a scar left on the earth by a natural disaster many years ago. It started from the Jewel Bay in the east, passed through the Jade Green Court and the Eternal Song Forest, and extended to the Duchy of the Human Kingdom and the Gold Digger Basin. Near the Mark of the Dead, life was extinct. Even undead creatures found it hard to survive. That was the purest and most violent force of extinction. It was invincible to mortals. This world has many similarities with the game world, but also many differences. There are no marks of the dead in the game world, and I've never heard of Rolling Stone Town and Jade Green Court. Could it be the same universe, but not the same plane? He turned his gaze away. Matthew descended the hill. Behind him was the gradually forming oak forest. In front of him was a barren land, and behind the oak forest was the red-roofed, yellow-bricked Rolling Stone Town. The three areas were clearly demarcated. Sometimes Matthew felt that the task issued by the system might be related to the Mark of the Dead, because the more he looked at the oak forest, the more it looked like a shield standing in front of the Mark of the Dead. What a pity. Just relying on an oak forest won't stop the spread of the Mark of the Dead. He thought casually. Matthew circled a large area at the foot of the hill. Finally, he found a few suitable pit locations. Although this place was beyond the range he had planned, it was still a distance from the Mark of the Dead, and the oak saplings planted would not fail to survive. Limited by his physique and strength, Matthew wasn't exactly a whirlwind worker, but he made up for it with experience. He maintained a certain rhythm and speed, until the sun was high in the sky. The little saplings In the sack were all settled at the foot of the hill. Matthew wiped his sweat and took out a bottle of green liquid from his bosom, sprinkling it one by one on the oak saplings. This was something he had bought at a high price from a druid in Watcher's Heights, which had a catalytic and consolidating effect on plants, and long-term watering could replace 20 years of natural growth. Unfortunately, this was the last bottle Matthew had. These 3 years, Matthew had almost invested all his savings in the grand tree planting project. Now it was finally time to reap the rewards. His hand trembled slightly, plop, drops of green liquid fell, the little saplings that had just wilted instantly perked up. At that moment Matthew's eyes also lit up. You have successfully planted 5 oak trees, your affinity with nature has slightly increased, cumulative number of oak trees planted and survived, 1001. You have completed the primary objective of the main task, planting trees. You have been rewarded with necromantic summoning and large amount of XP. Your level has increased to level 8, the spell level of your necromantic summoning has increased to level 8, and you have gained an additional contract slot, your intelligence +1, your perception +1, you have gained a new ability, instant summon, you have gained a new ability, fixed point drop, your ability, Pustule Mastery, has been upgraded to Pustule Proficiency, you can learn higher level spells now. A dense stream of information floated in front of Matthew's eyes. A tremendous sense of satisfaction surged in his heart. The increase in attributes and abilities was not beyond Matthew's expectations, but in terms of experience, the fact that he had leveled up 3 times and still had some left over was very generous. This was much more than the experience he gained every day through necromantic meditation. However, what Matthew values the most is the summoning of Bone Dragon, Necromancy. You can summon a Bone Dragon to serve you at any time. Note, the level of this Bone Dragon does not exceed level 15, contract status, contracted. Turns out it's already in a contracted state, saving me a contract slot. Matthew was very satisfied. Necromancy is the Necromancer's signature skill, which grows stronger as the level increases, and for every 2 levels of professional upgrade, there is an additional contract slot. This is used to establish specific summons. Necromancers consume less mana when summoning contracted targets. The level of cooperation between the 2 parties is also higher, over time. Some necromancers even develop feelings for their contracted entities. Null minds.ina hidden. Underground cave. Matthew, holding the Staff of Decay, attempts to summon the Bone Dragon for the first time. The spell resounds, with the support of the new ability. When the first syllable came out from Matthew's mouth, a reverse 6-pointed star magic circle pointing to the negative energy plane flickered in the dark cave. Grey bone dust and green phosphorus fire floated from the void like snowflakes. Matthew looked closely. A skeletal beast, half submerged in the darkness, lurked cautiously. Feet. The soul fire in the Bone Dragon's skull lit up in a ghostly blue. It looked at Matthew indifferently. Matthew felt a little nervous under its gaze. The air was filled with a constant fee sound like wind leaking from a cave. Man and dragon stood in a standoff. Matthew's muscles were extremely tense. This was his first time facing a creature nearly twice his level. The contracted bond allowed him to be immune to the faint dragon's majesty, but the immense pressure from its size and the fear from its terrifying image could not be erased. No wonder people always have prejudice against necromancers. Everything in the realm of necromancy is more terrifying than the last. How many people can face this kind of fear? Matthew adjusted his mindset. He waved the Staff of Decay and ordered the Bone Dragon, bow down. The Bone Dragon moved slowly but firmly, its long neck slowly wound around the rocks and ceiling of the cave, and then it landed steadily on the ground in front of Matthew. Its jawbone was close to the ground. The blue soul fire flickered. Somehow, Matthew felt a hint of nervousness from the soul fire of this huge creature in front of him. Matthew couldn't help but laugh. If the Bone Dragon was nervous, he wasn't. He bravely stepped onto the Bone Dragon's head. The latter made a woo-woo sound, seeming very docile. Matthew was greatly relieved. He bent down to touch the Bone Dragon's bones. They were dry and very coarse. It was not a precious bone at first glance. When we have money, I'll get you a new set of fine bones, Matthew couldn't help saying. Fee, the Bone Dragon hummed lowly. Matthew laughed. Are you so easily satisfied? Then I'll draw more pies for you in the future. The Bone Dragon slowly raised its head. Its movement was very small. Matthew was able to look down at the cave from a higher angle. This place was originally a paradise for gold diggers, but after the mines were exhausted and abandoned, it was occupied by a Knoll tribe, and after the Blood Flag family took control of Rolling Stone Town, the local lord issued several Knoll expulsion orders. Only after the adventurers and mercenaries around hunted them down did this area gradually become desolate. According to Matthew, there are still many such caves in the Gold Digger Basin. These caves are intricate and complex. There are rumors that some of the caves even connect to a more vast underground world that was also the real direction the Knolls retreated to. Matthew rarely ventured into these areas. But the Bone Dragon was too big. Even this underground cave could barely accommodate it. One can imagine the uproar it would cause if it appeared on the surface. He was a low-key and pragmatic person. He never intended to hide his identity as a necromancer, but he also didn't want to invite trouble for no reason. It's better to just play in the cave in the future. Thinking this way, Matthew carefully examined the Bone Dragon's body. He also checked its data in passing: name, Felorios, race, Bone Dragon, attributes, strength 24/agility 10/constitution 17/intelligence 4/willpower 10/charisma 14, Traits: blind sense/immune to acid/immune to cold/sensitive senses/undead. Abilities: flattery/first strike/necro dragon majesty/charge/tail sweep. Flattery. Matthew realized belatedly. Was he trying to please me just now? As if to confirm Matthew's thought, the sound of the bone dragon's fee came from below, and the emotions conveyed by the flickering soul fire seemed to have a hint of flattery. The tough guy image that Matthew had just built up in his mind for the bone dragon because of its size and ferocity suddenly vanished. He couldn't help but stamp his foot. Your name is too hard to pronounce. From now on, I'll call you Little Fee. Felorios was puzzled for a moment, then the soul fire in its skull began to shake violently. A wave of joy came through the contract. Perhaps it was too happy. Little Fee's head shook too much. Matthew almost got thrown off. Fortunately, his perception and agility were not bad. With a graceful little jump, Matthew landed steadily in the shadows of the cave. But in that instant, he felt something was wrong. He turned to look in the direction where the strange feeling came from under his feet. He had stepped on a blood-stained piece of clothing. The Necromancer only wants to plant trees. Chapter 1, Mark of the Dead 003 Gifts of Nature. You have used the ability, Insight, judging by the size and style. It originally belonged to a female or a small-sized male. The blood on the clothes has long dried. It was left at least a few days ago. There is a set of messy footprints leading to the deeper part of the cave. The size is large, not left by kobolds or gnolls. The owner of the footprints is more likely to be a human, bear goblin, or half-orc. Take note of this information. Matthew meticulously puts on gloves and takes the blood-stained clothes, then he prepares to leave this place. The terrain of the underground cave is extremely complex, not a place where a mere necromancer can explore alone. The bone dragon is fierce, but its size is not suitable. The passage in front of Matthew could barely accommodate 2 people. Little Fervor can't squeeze through. Moreover, it's clearly something that happened a few days ago. Matthew thinks that handing over the blood-stained clothes to the security office is the best choice. The Blood Banner family is one of the few nobles who take the security of their territory very seriously, which is well known among the major human kingdoms. If someone has recently disappeared, the security office will not ignore it. Leaving the cave, Matthew quickly returns to the town. On the way, he finds that the main task has changed. Main task: planting trees. Progress achieved. Initial goal. Follow-up task 1, keep it up. Description: please continue to expand the scale of the oak forest planting in Rolling Stone Town. Target 3,000 trees. Reward: 10 XP/1 alive oak tree. Follow-up task 2, maintenance is also important. Description: a newborn forest is easily destroyed by an accident. Please be sure to protect your forest. Reward: each successful protection will receive different rewards. 10 experience points for each oak tree. Matthew's eyes lit up. Isn't this better than fighting and killing? Planting trees carries no risk. As for maintenance, Matthew didn't pay much attention. Since the extinction of the kobolds, the security of Rolling Stone Town has always been good. The bloodstained clothes in the cave should be an accident, probably related to those restless adventurers. My oak forest is planted on private land. No one would dare to secretly cut down the trees, right? Matthew thought so. In addition to the 2 follow-up tasks, Matthew found that, unbeknownst to him, a Tai Chi-like symbol had appeared at the bottom of the taskbar. The symbol is divided into left and right. Both sides are of the same shape, both resembling uppercase and transparent 3D commas. The distinction lies in the color of the light points flowing inside. The left side is gray. Currently only a tiny bit has accumulated at the bottom, while the right side is green. A large amount of light points are rolling in it, already accumulating about halfway. What is this? Matthew stared at it for a while. He found that the green light points are slowly increasing, especially when he passed by the oak forest. The speed of the light point increase seemed to have sped up a bit. The gray light points on the left hardly move, although the taskbar did not mark it. But he guessed that this might be related to the 2 professions of necromancer and druid. What will happen when the light points are full? Are the green light points abundant because I planted many trees? If I summon more undead, or use negative energy spells, can I increase the gray light points? On the way, Matthew was engrossed in his research. However, when he was close to the town, the appearance of an uninvited guest interrupted his thoughts. Hee. A laugh similar to a human little girl rang out. A faint white light lit up in front of Matthew. He steadied his footing. A thumb-sized, winged, young girl-like fairy flew out of the white light. She enthusiastically flew around Matthew 3 times, then shook the mini flower basket in her hand. A large bunch of fresh fruit fell into Matthew's arms. Then the white light flashed. The other party disappeared without a trace. Your ability, Gifts of Nature, is in effect. You have received a large bunch of raspberries, a sweet and crispy fruit rich in nutrients. With the blessing of fairies, it can slightly increase energy after consumption and has a slight purification effect. Today's luck is not bad. When he saw the item in his arms clearly, Matthew's slightly tense expression temporarily relaxed. This is an oak fairy. They are companions of the oak forest. Since the scale of the oak forest reached 500 trees, the fairies appeared. To express their gratitude and admiration for Matthew, they would send gifts from time to time. The fruits given by the oak fairies are mostly of extraordinary quality, but the problem is that these little fairies are naturally naughty, and pranks are almost Engraved in their blood, the last time they gave Matthew a gift that he was still in class. As a result, in front of a dozen children. A naughty oak fairy threw him a few women's underwear. This almost made Matthew unable to explain. He couldn't possibly tell his students that this was a gift from nature, could he? Fortunately, most of the time, the fairies were obedient. Matthew did not argue with them, chewing on the sweet raspberries. He quickened his pace. At the intersection 2 blocks away from the security office. He ran into the anxious face of Brad. A sturdy young man with a full face of beard. Matthew, I was just about to look for you. Brad was overjoyed to see Matthew. Matthew was stirred. Something happened? Brad nodded briskly. A farmer in the east found a merchant who had been intercepted and killed on the road. The body was just brought to the town, and I need your help. Matthew said without hesitation, let's go. The two hurried towards the direction of the security office. Brad was the captain of the security team. He was also one of the few people in Rolling Stone Town who knew Matthew's profession. In order to save money for his tree planting business, Matthew not only applied for a history teacher at Siver Public School, but also worked part-time as a corpse consultant at the security office. As everyone knows, Call of the Dead is the most basic necromancy spell, which can summon the soul of the recently deceased for interrogation. With Matthew's strong support, the case-solving rate of the security office soared. Over time, the residents of the territory all knew that Brad of the security office was like a god in solving cases, so there were very few incidents. It can be seen that Matthew has indeed contributed a lot to the current security environment of Rolling Stone Town. A moment later. In the morgue of the security office. In front of Matthew stood a ghost with a restrained look and a bewildered expression. Who killed you? Brad asked with practiced ease. The ghost pondered. It was a man, with disheveled hair, very tall. Brad frowned. Why did he kill you? The ghost shook his head. I don't know. That day I was returning from Rapid City with goods. Because I had some drinks, I took the wrong road. When I woke up, I was near Ghost Hag's castle. I saw a group of people singing and dancing there, and many ghosts were flying around their heads. That scene was really terrible, those ghosts. As he said this, he began to tremble all over, seeing that he could not even maintain the shape of his spirit body. Matthew quickly interjected, don't be afraid, you're a ghost now too. The ghost responded flatly, oh, do you remember anything else? Any suspicious information? Brad took the opportunity to continue questioning. The ghost shook his head. I don't know, that day I came back from Rapid City with goods, that scene was really terrible, those ghosts. Brad and Matthew looked at each other, a little helpless. Ghosts are like this, most of them only have a small amount of memories from their life, and they are usually those with strong emotional colors. Apart from these. No matter what you ask him, he will only repeat some memory fragments, which is the limitation of Call of the Dead. Brad tried to ask a few other questions. After confirming that there was no way to pry more useful information from the ghost's mouth. He signaled Matthew with his eyes to lift the spell. Before Matthew could act, the ghost actually looked over. Wait, am I really dead? Brad said sympathetically, I'm sorry. The ghost sighed, what a pity. I haven't bought a grave for myself yet. After I die, my wife will surely take away the family property, take the children and marry another merchant. I'm afraid she won't choose a suitable place for me to be buried with care. Brad was at a loss for words. Can you bury my body in the oak forest north of the town? No need for a coffin, just bury it directly. I quite like oak trees. The last time I passed by I seemed to hear little girls chattering and arguing. According to my grandma, I might have bumped into a flower fairy. I just have this one wish. With that, his spirit body gradually faded. Before Brad could speak, Matthew promised, sure. Thank you. The ghost disappeared. Brad looked at Matthew hesitantly. Matthew shrugged. Master Ronan won't mind. Brad scratched his head. All right, as you wish, it's your forest anyway. But this body won't be handed over to you until tomorrow. There are still some necessary checks and procedures tonight. Matthew nodded. Taking this opportunity, he told Brad about the discovery in the underground cave. After hearing this, Brad's expression was extremely serious. I understand, I will arrange for someone to inquire. You also need to be careful, Matthew, don't wander outside the town by yourself in the future. I've been feeling uneasy recently. Oh, by the way, remember to collect your allowance for this month. I've applied for double for you. On hearing this, Matthew's eyes narrowed instantly. I love to hear that. Tonight's main course is matsutake rice. The side dish is cabbage egg soup and a few slices of bacon. The taste is great. Matthew licked the bowl clean. In the end he couldn't help but praise, Peggy, your cooking skills are really great. Even among the living, you are top-notch. In the words of my hometown, the man who marries you is lucky. The Minotaur skeleton was a little embarrassed. Not at all, I just did it casually. And I'm already dead, so I can't marry anyone. After a while, seeing that Matthew was still immersed in the delicious food, she plucked up the courage to ask, Matthew, seeing that I'm doing so well, are you going to give me a raise? Matthew wiped his mouth and got up skillfully. Next time for sure. His figure quickly disappeared into the basement corridor. Damn Necromancer. The Minotaur skeleton roared. Matthew pretended not to hear. He went to the basement, did not start his daily meditation, but took out a crystal ball that was about to gather dust from the cabinet in the next room, the bloody clothes in the cave, the murdered merchant, the abnormal crowd lingering in Ghost Hag's castle in the ghost's description, like Brad. Matthew also felt a sense of unease. So tonight he planned to perform a divination. The Necromancer just wants to plant trees. The first part, Mark of the Dead 004, the art of the turtle shell mage. The divination failed. Matthew tucked the crystal ball back into the cabinet with his usual expression. It was a regular occurrence that he was a necromancer, and he had no talent for divination, although he always took the time to dabble in divination due to his love for it over these years. The results were obviously not satisfactory. He slightly calmed his emotions. Matthew eventually arrived at the room at the far west of the basement. Two large bookcases were placed here, all filled with magic books. He was preparing to learn some spells that matched his current level. Matthew was now a level 8 necromancer, but the spells on the list were still those he learned and mastered at level 5. It was time for an update. In Rolling Stone Town. Buying a magic book that records the principles of spells is not easy, not to mention those related to the path of the undead. Fortunately, Matthew was prepared. He always had friends helping him buy in advance, plus the part given by the great mage Ronan. The spell books in this room were enough to meet Matthew's needs before level 10. His gaze swept back and forth between the layers of the bookcase. After a while, Matthew made a list of spells for himself. These were the spells he planned to learn next: Feign Death, The Last Dance, Vampire's Touch, Garcia's Armor 2, Thunderbolt Sword, Enhanced Summoning. Learning spells is not easy for most people. Most mages have to spend almost half their time studying and mastering spells. These 6 spells given to other necromancers of the same level would take at least 10 months to learn. This is under full effort, but Matthew was different. His speed of learning spells is inversely proportional to his talent for divination. He was confident that he could finish them in 3 months. I need to focus on learning spells next. I need to take a leave from school. Matthew came to the meditation room with a stack of books. It was close to midnight. He was a bit sleepy. Peggy, a cup of coffee. No one responded. So Matthew had to make a cup of black coffee himself. The bitter and rich taste immediately woke him up. I'm awake. Matthew pursed his lips. He casually opened a thick book. On the title page, the playful magic words jumped out. They danced gracefully at the tip of Matthew's nose. Garcia's Armor 2, the art of the turtle shell mage. Annotated. Garcia's self-mockery is as exquisite as his skills. I recommend every mage to learn a spell from the Garcia series. Ronan, great mage Ronan. I hope his journey through the stars is going well. Matthew smiled. Great mage Ronan was the greatest benefactor he met after crossing over. When Matthew had just crossed over, he was completely blind to this world. Apart from the task of planting trees, he had no clues, but planting trees also required money, land, and other resources. Matthew wandered around Rolling Stone Town for a while, almost to the point where he couldn't afford to eat. A crucial time. It was Ronan who happened to pass by and helped him. He invited Matthew to his house for dinner and asked why he, a caster who was studying the path of the undead, didn't go to develop in White Rock City, but was wandering aimlessly in a place with no prospects like Rolling Stone Town. Matthew said that his talent in the path of the undead was average and he was reluctant to stop there, so he had a sudden idea. I plan to plant some trees near Rolling Stone Town, and hopefully, I can grow a forest. I want to feel the power of life through this move, which may help my breakthrough in the path of the undead. This was a lie Matthew made up in order to get a few more meals. Unexpectedly, this caught Ronan's interest. He expressed great appreciation for Matthew's whimsical idea. Ronan told Matthew he can plant trees on his land, and the cost of buying seeds and green liquid, Ronan planned to sponsor half. Matthew was flattered, but he still declined Ronan's kindness. He planned to rely on his own strength to buy seeds. Ronan didn't mind. He immediately wrote a letter of recommendation, allowing Matthew to teach at Westfield Public School for the town's nobles' children, and Matthew could choose the subject himself. Afterwards, Ronan also gave Matthew some help in life, work, and tree planting. Even the house Matthew lives in now was provided by Ronan. Matthew later learned half of the houses in the Mage District belonged to Ronan, the other half belonged to his wife. Rolling Stone Town was Ronan's hometown. Although he lived in Gem Bay most of the time, but Rolling Stone Town has been free of natural disasters and man-made disasters for many years, and he has a lot to do with it. As for great mage Ronan, Matthew was always grateful, but he also knew why the other party helped him. Clinging to the big leg blindly is impossible, still have to rely on their own strength to truly grow up. With this in mind, Matthew focused his attention. He began to study the spells with full concentration. The next day during the day, Matthew walked out of the security office, followed by 2 members of the guard team. They carried the body of the merchant and came to the oak forest. Matthew skillfully dug a hole and buried him, thus fulfilling the ghost's wish. Of course, having come this far, Matthew didn't forget to plant 3 oak trees. 30 XP points were credited. Matthew was satisfied. In the afternoon, Brad acted quickly. He told Matthew the underground cavern had been investigated. No other clues were found. The cavern was connected to 7 or 8 deep tunnels, which could lead to almost any place in the Gold Diggers Basin. Even the most skilled tracker would be at a loss in this situation. This was in line with Matthew's judgment. It also proved that his decision not to investigate recklessly was correct. As for the surrounding area mentioned by the ghost, because the place had been in decline for many years and was located deep in the mountains, it was relatively dangerous. Therefore, Brad was still gathering manpower. He promised Matthew that he would notify him immediately if there were any new discoveries. 1 week later, in the evening. In the basement. Versus Boo, a short spell was heard. Suddenly, a layer of semi-transparent armor that looked very heavy appeared on Matthew. Your spell, Garcia's Armor 2, has been successfully cast. Your armor plus 8 duration, 180 seconds, success. Feeling the soft and squishy, all-encompassing sensation, Matthew was very absorbed. It felt like being wrapped in a giant jelly, not heavy but highly defensive. According to Turtle Shell Mage, the biggest feature of Garcia's armor is that it can be superimposed. 1 and 2 can provide 3 and 8 points of armor respectively, which is higher than the average heavy armor. Indeed worthy of the Turtle Shell Mage, I like it. Matthew was just about to continue exploring the technique of superimposing 2 spells. Suddenly a vision appeared before his eyes. In that moment he seemed to see a corner of the oak forest. The vision disappeared in a flash. Immediately, a heat wave surged up in Matthew's heart. He suddenly knew more in his mind. Your ability, Gift of Nature, is in effect. You have gained new abilities, Appraisal, and Accounting Appraisal. For most goods circulating in the Rapid City, you can accurately estimate their value and price. Accounting. You have mastered a certain amount of financial knowledge, enough to handle basic accounting positions. Appraisal, accounting. Matthew was puzzled. Is this also a gift from nature? He muttered to himself. At this moment, Matthew suddenly remembered the corner of the oak forest he had just glimpsed seemed to be the place where he had buried the merchant's body. If I bury the body, nature will give me part of his abilities? This speculation seemed absurd and even a bit frightening, but Matthew thought it was very likely to be true. Can you just bury the body, or do you need to fulfill the deceased's wishes? How many bodies can a forest bury? Is there a limit to this gift? Will it get negative abilities? Matthew stopped thinking further. Everything still has to be based on practice. He noticed that the taskbar symbol, the green energy bar on the right had risen a lot, almost reaching 2/3. This should also be related to the gift just now. Don't rush, take it slow. Even if there is a shortcut to get the gift, you have to take it easy. You can't turn Master Ronan's land into a chaotic burial mound. Matthew's eyes flickered slightly. At this moment, I think you look like an evil necromancer. At the entrance to the basement, Peggy leaned against the wall in a seductive pose and said. Matthew ignored her coquetry. Is dinner ready so early? Peggy shook her head. It's Big Beard, he seems to be in a hurry to see you. At the gate. What? Someone kidnapped SIV? Matthew was surprised. Brad nodded hastily. Don't spread the word, I just received the news. The other party asked for a ransom, but the Lord judged that the other party was just delaying time to delay the rescue. At present, the Blood Flag family is secretly gathering manpower. I was originally leading the team to the Ghost Witch's castle. After receiving the urgent report, I had to turn back. Of course, this is necessary. Nothing is more important than Miss SIV's safety. Brad concluded. I came to remind you to be careful, there may be more anomalies happening next. You don't need to worry about Miss SIV, everyone will do their best. After saying that, he left in a hurry. Matthew frowned slightly. SIV was the only daughter of the Blood Flag family in this generation. She was also his student. Like Bina, the girls at Siver Public School all liked Matthew. Matthew remembered the last time he saw SIV. The girl had confidently told Matthew that she had written an anonymous letter to the City Hall recommending him for the Outstanding Citizen Award. And later the City Hall people did come to confirm it that in a blink of an eye, SIV was actually kidnapped. Kidnapping the only daughter of the Blood Flag family in Rolling Stone Town. Isn't that outrageous? Whoever did this, either it was premeditated, or they're simply crazy. How mad must a madman be to not be deterred by the name of Master Ronan? Matthew was deeply worried for SIV. Unfortunately, he didn't have any clues about the kidnapper. Divination was not his strong suit either. It seemed that he couldn't help much. He closed the door. Matthew sighed softly. From the kitchen came the voice of the Minotaur skeleton. Dinner's ready. Matthew was about to go over. Suddenly, a flash of white light appeared in front of him. A frantic oak fairy rushed towards him. What's wrong? Matthew listened to the fairy's chirping complaints. His expression became more and more serious. Someone set a fire. Is it getting close to the oak forest? Matthew burst into the room. He began to change his clothes at the fastest speed. You have equipped the Mist Robe, +1, Mist Robe, Armor +0, Casting Speed +10%, slightly increases Spirit Recovery Speed. You have equipped the Withered Wood Wand, Attack +1, Necromancy level +1. You have equipped the Mysterious Method Bag, contains 8 folding spaces. Each folding space can store up to 12 similar items, current stored items, corrupt spores / phantom butterfly / several scrolls. After changing into a completely different outfit from his usual attire. Matthew's entire demeanor changed. If he usually seemed like a friendly young teacher, then now he had taken a big step closer to the stereotypical image of a necromancer. Dinner's ready. Peggy came over with a plate of mushroom stir-fry. I'll eat when I get back. Leaving this sentence behind, Matthew hurriedly ran into the night. 10 minutes later, Matthew's figure appeared at the edge of the oak grove. Accompanying him was only a mage's fire used for illumination. His face didn't look good. The suspected arsonist posed a significant threat to his most important resources. He was like a cat whose tail had been stepped on, instantly becoming enraged. According to normal logic, he should seek help from the security office at this moment, but firstly, Matthew considered that Brad must be busy dealing with Sif's affairs and might not be able to spare time to deal with his own affairs. Secondly, he also wanted to personally punish this audacious arsonist. My hard-earned forest. It's not something any Tom, Dick, or Harry can mess with. At the edge of the oak grove, Matthew stood on his toes and looked into the distance. From here, indeed, he could see a large fire. The fire had not yet spread to the oak grove, thanks to the fact that there was not much flammable material in this area. He composed himself and noticed that the place where the flames had started seemed to be a farm. There was only a hill separating the farm from the oak grove. Matthew had met the owner of the farm a few times. His daughter was very cute. The fire at the farm was so fierce, yet there was no one shouting for help nearby. The fate of the farmer's family was not hard to guess. Not ordinary robbers. Matthew calmed down. The oak fairies told him that there were many arsonists and they exuded an evil and powerful aura, which indicated that it was most likely the work of adventurers. In the face of unknown enemy strength, he could not act rashly. So he watched a little longer, then he quickly ran to the other end of the oak grove. Soon, Matthew arrived at the location in his memory. It was a huge haystack. Under the haystack, there was a place similar to a cellar. The cellar was not big. The layout was a bit like Matthew's dormitory in his previous life. Plop. Matthew opened the iron cover. After a brief sense he began to use the necromancy under the guidance of mana. Suddenly a pale hand slapped on the muddy ground at the exit of the cellar. Immediately after, one skeleton after another climbed out from inside. In no time, there were 12 skeletons with faint green soul fires in their skulls by the side of the haystack. Most of these skeletons were robust, highly intact, armed with weapons and small round shields, and were the elites among the skeleton soldiers. They were all summoning objects that Matthew had carefully collected. It took him a lot of effort to give them their current spiritual appearance. You know, necromancy is not created out of nothing. Even the most powerful necromancer can't summon a team of skeletons out of thin air. Summoning the undead requires materials. Take the skeleton soldiers as an example. Summoning them requires a certain number of bones. If the number is insufficient, even if the summoning is successful, the skeleton soldiers you get are missing arms and legs. Forget about fighting, even walking a few steps might cause them to fall apart. The reason why skeleton soldiers have become synonymous with cannon fodder is that the materials they need are relatively easy to obtain. Others, like black knights, blood demons, bone dragons, soul eaters, etc., are 1,000 times harder to summon, of course. There is also a way to bypass the spell materials to obtain summoning objects, that is to build a magic circle pointing to the negative energy plane. Pull people directly from there, but doing so consumes even more astonishing wealth. Even high-level mages would weigh heavily before constructing such a magic circle. So generally speaking, there is a reason why necromancers with low moral sense prefer to linger in cemeteries and graveyards. They are really poor, and like Matthew, almost every bone in the cellar was bought by him or accidentally picked up. He is absolutely considered a saint among necromancers. Go! Upon Matthew's command, the slightly sluggish skeleton soldiers slowly followed his footsteps. A chill began to spread in the oak grove. Even the noisy night wind became quiet. It seemed as if they were also wary of the arrival of the undead. Boom. A violent flame exploded in the field. The fierce wind fueled the fire, seeing the farm gradually being swallowed by the sea of fire. Blackson, wearing a black vest and showing half of his muscular body, revealed a heartfelt smile. He suppressed the idea of continuing to set fires and turned his gaze to the dark forest not far away. It seems that Fine's information is not false. At this time, they are completely unprepared for the attack on Rolling Stone Town. Let me give them a little more shock of fire. He strode towards the direction of the hill. Behind him, 6 followers also followed. Is everything arranged? Blackson asked lightly. Boss, rest assured, not a single survivor, all burned alive. One of them, a scar-faced man, revealed a ferocious smile. Blackson nodded in satisfaction. As an 11th level arsonist, he could feel his power increasing a little bit, not much, but it was clear and visible. In fact, he was supposed to retreat after burning the farm as per the original plan, but the sensation of power enhancement made him utterly engrossed, especially when he noticed the oak forest in front of him. He immediately changed his mind. He could feel the vitality contained in this forest. Burning it would bring him a significant power boost, that was about 10 times the yield of the farm. It was almost on par with burning a block in a city, but the risk was far less than arson in the city. No arsonist could resist such temptation, especially when Heisen clearly sensed that once he burned this forest, the legendary path that was initially very vague to him would become clear. He couldn't suppress the crazy idea anymore. Fire, fire, he wanted to burn, 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 stop. Halfway up the hill, Heisen suddenly shouted. 6 followers immediately came over vigilantly. Boss, what's wrong? Should we retreat? Scarface asked. Hyzen ignored him, just staring ahead with wide eyes. The night wind brought a faint green glow, the air faintly smelled of decay. It's bonfire. Hyzen thoughtfully looked at the line of figures slowly appearing on the hill. Skeleton soldiers? A necromancer? Hyzen's frown immediately relaxed. Did Fine send you? Tell him when I burn this forest, I'll find him. As for whether to join the cult, it depends on his sincerity. The skeleton soldiers stood still. The person hiding in the dark controlling these undead did not make a sound. Hyzen laughed helplessly. You're not going to stop me, are you? With these bone frames? The followers also laughed. Scarface volunteered. Boss, I can kick all these skeletons away by myself. Hyzen shook his head, his eyes searched around the hillside. His eyes were incredibly sharp, but he never acted rashly. After a few minutes, his tense state suddenly relaxed. The two large muscles in his chest also trembled. Stop playing hide and seek, I found your location. Didn't Fine tell you what I do? Hee, I'm very sensitive to temperature. He jokingly said towards the skeleton soldiers. Do all you necromancers like to hide in a pile of trash mobs? So uncreative. But the other party still didn't answer. Hyzen finally got angry. If you don't get lost, I'll burn you too. With that said, a glass bottle with a firelight suddenly appeared in his hand. I'm not playing hide and seek. Finally, such a voice came from behind a skeleton soldier. I was just waiting for the rot pouch to take effect, you just inhaled it. Matthew stood on the hillside. A large amount of negative energy surged from the tip of the deadwood staff. Rot pouch, accelerate infection. Not good. Hyzen looked back. The expressions of the followers were slightly panicked. They began to realize something was wrong. My face is a bit itchy. So are my arms. It's so itchy. It feels like something is growing out. In their horrified eyes, some people's skin surface began to develop patches of red pimples. At first, these pimples were not noticeable and didn't feel anything. Soon they became unbearably itchy. People couldn't control their hands from scratching, and as scratched, a large amount of yellow-green pus gushed out, splashed onto other parts of the skin. The infection began to spread more rapidly. With the continuous spread of the infection area, among the crowd, the breath from the negative plane became thicker and thicker. Don't scratch, killing that necromancer will be fine. Hyzen made a prompt decision and roared. A group of people charged up the hill. Enduring the itch, Matthew continued to wave his staff, this time he didn't even need to chant. Necromancy summoning, contracted creature, your ability, instant summon, is in effect. Your ability, fixed point drop, is in effect. On the hillside, a large green circle appeared in the area where the group was about to rush up. Dodge quickly. Before Hyzen could finish, a tall figure fell from the sky. Bang! A follower couldn't dodge in time, was smashed into a meat sauce. The people next to them were also affected by the shock wave, rolled down the hill one after another. Hyzen looked over angrily, but the 2-meter-tall figure was looking around in confusion. Her bones were immaculate, but what caught the eye was the dinner plate she was holding. Matthew. Are you ready for dinner? I just reheated the mushroom stir-fried noodles. Peggy looked at Matthew excitedly. No, throw away the stir-fried noodles, Peggy, I need you to fight for me. Matthew said. Peggy's mood suddenly became serious. She turned to face the arsonist, then she said to Matthew, well then, please strengthen me. Chapter 006, Necromancer's Signature. Atop the hillside, a 2-meter-tall minotaur skeleton stood proudly. Blackson was glaring at Peggy with a grim expression. Unlike the skeleton soldiers, Peggy's bones were far superior in both color and texture, especially those bones around her waist and thighs. They were showing an almost dark gold color overall. This color, under the backdrop of the night, appeared particularly mysterious and powerful. Matthew did not hesitate. One by one, magical scrolls were pulled out from his bag of tricks, then he ripped them up without hesitation. In just a few seconds, one enhancement spell after another was cast on the minotaur skeleton: Bear's Resilience, Bull's Strength, Cat's Grace, Owl's Wisdom, Blade Barrier, Negative Energy Shield. Considering the enemy's profession, Matthew even spent a hefty sum to equip Peggy with a valuable ring. This would grant her temporary immunity to fire. Arcane auras fell one after another. These enhancement spells pushed Peggy's original 3rd-tier combat power straight to the peak of the 3rd tier. She looked even more formidable. However, she was not satisfied. Is that all? Where's the eagle's splendor? The fox's cunning? Why not go all out? Matthew waved his hand. I'm out of mana. Of course, this was a lie. What he really thought was, what do you need extra charisma and intelligence checks for, as a skeleton? Let's do it, make it quick. As he spoke, Matthew began to command the skeletons to move forward with his mental power. Peggy did not ask for more. She forcefully reached down to her thigh. With a crisp snap, the dark gold thigh bone was pulled out by her. This half-human height bone blade was her most handy weapon. Losing this thigh bone would not affect her balance and movement, but with this bone blade, her ability to inflict damage would increase by several times more. Who? The bone blade tore through the air. Peggy charged forward. The minions who were originally blocking the front scattered like birds. Peggy's target was obviously not these small fries. She took a big stride. The distance of more than 10 meters disappeared in an instant. Bang! The bone blade struck the short knife that the arsonist had hastily drawn. Blackson, who had successfully parried, sank a bit. His chest muscles were trembling violently, there was a hint of disbelief in his eyes. The next second, the obviously high-quality short knife was rapidly twisting. Blackson wisely let go of his hand, then he rolled on the spot. A whooshing sound grazed his scalp, half of his originally flowing black hair was cut off, a bald spot was exposed at the top of his head, similar to a Mediterranean haircut. You ignorant skeleton. Blackson completely lost it. He rolled continuously to dodge Peggy's attacks, plop, plop, plop. One after another, 3 bottles of red potion were smashed onto the ground in front of him. A firewall formed in an instant. Matthew was sharp-eyed. He saw that it was. Don't rush in. He quickly warned, the flame of burning jelly is particularly fierce, the ring of heat resistance can immune heat, but not necessarily the destructive power of the fire itself. Peggy did not rush in, she calmly bypassed the fire and chased Blackson. However, Blackson was also very cunning, his moves were clearly honed in urban alley fights, with the help of his arson tools he easily tangled with Peggy. The Minotaur skeleton's several attacks were all neutralized by him. Soon, there were burning fires all around Peggy. Her maneuvering space was constantly being compressed, the situation was gradually being dominated by Blackson. The profession of arsonist seems to counter me a bit, Matthew quietly noted. This profession is most likely evil, guys, kill one every time you see one in the future. The suppression of fire on the undead is obvious. Not only was Peggy restricted, the skeleton soldiers were also instinctively avoiding places where the fire was burning. Blackson caught this. He immediately scolded his remaining minions. What are you dawdling for? Use the burning bottles, break through the skeleton's blockade, and kill that necromancer. Blackson's calm command in the face of danger greatly inspired his minions. They were originally thrown into confusion by the corruption bag, only knowing to avoid the pursuit of the skeleton soldiers. Now, they were reacting. Cover me. Scarface endured the itching and called his companions. That necromancer shouldn't have much mana left, as long as we charge over, we can win. The remaining 3 reluctantly nodded, they began to act in groups, the sound of shattered glass bottles became more frequent, and the flames on the hillside were turbulent. Luckily, this area was all wasteland, unable to form a fiercer fire. Even so, the movements of the skeleton soldiers were also affected to some extent. Scarface took advantage of the fire and darted left and right. Suddenly, he noticed a gap in the skeleton's movements. There! Scarface shouted calmly. He held his short knife and charged. Skeleton soldiers on both sides were belatedly trying to reinforce, however, they were all blocked by Scarface's companions with a death or glory attitude. Bang! A minion was hit by a shield from a skeleton soldier on the side while blocking the front, and his head was bloody. When he stumbled and fell, he was still looking forward to Scarface's increasingly blurred running figure. I won't let you down. Scarface looked back, then he started to speed up. In a few breaths he successfully crossed the defensive line built by the skeleton soldiers. That hateful necromancer was already close at hand. Go to hell, Scarface sneered and launched his final charge, but the next second, his eyes bulged dramatically. He saw the necromancer suddenly raise his left hand that had been hidden under his robe. The thin fabric slid off Matthew's arm under the moonlight. A delicate and compact hand crossbow was revealed under the thin mist robe. The tip of the crossbow arrow was still tinged with green light. The smirk on Scarface's face froze instantly. Whoosh! The crossbow arrow hit right in the chest. Scarface, who was running, stumbled unexpectedly. He fell powerless and rolled down the hillside. The hand crossbow is indeed a reliable partner on the road to growth for spellcasters. Matthew skillfully strung the hand crossbow. These arsonists had performed beyond his expectations. Fortunately, he had more than one trick up his sleeve. After taking out Scarface, the threat of the small fry was gone. Under Matthew's command, the skeleton soldiers contracted their defense line and pushed forward step by step. The remaining 3 followers managed to join Black Forest in chaos. But Peggy had already outflanked them from behind. A solid encirclement was formed. Seeing this, Matthew still felt it was not secure enough. There was still a sense of resistance in the eyes of these enemies. It seemed that the pressure was not enough. Why not try the signature move of the Necromancer? Matthew cleared his throat. He tried to make the evil horse voice described in the web articles he had read before. It seems you guys also want to become my minions. The effect of this move was surprisingly good. It seemed that the thought of becoming the Necromancer's toy after death, the will of the followers collapsed instantly. They began to scatter and flee. However, at this moment, the pouch of decay on their bodies had spread to the entire skin surface. Even their eyelids were covered with a thin layer of blood membrane. Because they couldn't see the road clearly, they could only run away like headless flies, which provided great convenience for the skeleton soldiers to clean up the mess. In no time, the 3 followers were killed one after another. So far, there was only one person left on the enemy side. Matthew did not take it lightly. This guy was a genuine 3rd-tier professional, probably an elite. Under normal circumstances, Peggy might not be able to win a one-on-one fight with him. He chose a more robust finishing strategy. Halfway up the hillside, the fire gradually went out. Black Forest stared at Matthew with a face full of blood. Behind him was a minotaur skeleton with a bone blade and terrifying fighting power. In front of him was a well-equipped skeleton soldier squad. This kind of configuration could have a chance to take down some unguarded villages, but it was used by this Necromancer to deal with him and his men, a group of criminals who wandered here. Black Forest felt very aggrieved that he really wanted to ask this necromancer what the hell was wrong with him, but reason told him, this is meaningless. The individual quality of the skeleton soldiers is not enough, maybe I can try to surprise them, such a thought circled in Black Forest's mind, but he quickly dismissed it that he looked at the hand crossbow held by the necromancer with trepidation, his eyes were full of strong unwillingness that he irritably scratched his incredibly itchy cheek. I am not in a state to kill the enemy 100% right now, consider him lucky. He quickly took 2 steps to the side, close to the nearly extinguished fire wall, then he quickly took out a bottle of purple-green potion and gulped it down. Gulp, gulp, gulp. Black Forest drank very quickly. When there was only half left, he stopped. The next time we meet, I will grind you to dust. Leaving a harsh word, Black Forest turned and ran down the hillside. That moment, his speed was incredibly fast that he even pulled out a long afterimage under the moonlight, sprint potion. Peggy originally planned to go and interrupt his potion drinking action, but Black Forest was incredibly fast that he had finished before she could get close to him. At that time, the afterimage swiftly swept past the side of the Minotaur skeleton. The soul fire in Peggy's skull suddenly brightened. Whoosh, the bone blade predicted a position in front. With a crisp sound, the bone blade was deeply embedded in Black Forest's shoulder blade. Good prediction. Matthew couldn't help but praise aloud. However, Black Forest's tenacity was much higher than he had imagined. After taking this hit hard that he only stumbled a bit, then he continued to run wildly without making a sound. Hey, my leg! Peggy slipped and failed to catch her bone blade, which was carried away by Black Forest. With a strong ability to escape, plus the aid of a high-level sprint potion, it is hard to catch him unless a trap is set in advance. Black Forest's escape skills were very proficient. With this combination he had escaped danger several times in a row. He believed this time would be no exception. Matthew. Peggy was anxious. You go first. Matthew said calmly, his eyes were locked on the direction where Black Forest's afterimage was going. I won't let him escape. Matthew was ready to use his big move. However, at this moment, his body suddenly trembled slightly, then a strong sense of desire and hatred surged into his mind. After hesitating for 2 seconds, Matthew decisively began to chant another spell. Near the farm, Black Forest's speed slowed down. His current state was very bad. Peggy's bone blade almost split him in half from behind. If it weren't for his super high tenacity to support him, he would have been a dead man. Even so, he urgently needed a place to heal now. There's fire here, they can't get close. Thinking this, Black Forest decisively broke into the farm. All around were raging flames, but for him, it was like coming home. Arsonists have high fire resistance, and as long as they are a little careful, ordinary fire can't pose any threat to them. Safe for now. Leaning against a stone house that had been burned beyond recognition, Black Forest took a brief rest. He glanced at the bone blade behind him, his brow furrowing constantly. Just as he was contemplating how to deal with his injuries and pursuers, a shrill roar suddenly pierced his eardrums. Black Forest was startled. A severe pain came from his chest. He turned around in horror, but saw a blurry ghost sticking to him. The next second, the ghost's claw was pulled out of Black Forest's chest. Thud, thud. The heart exposed to the air was still beating powerfully. No. Black Forest's cry of despair was stuck in his throat because in an instant, his vocal cords were torn to shreds by the ghost. You sensed a strong resentment, and following the resentment itself, you used Necromancer summoning. You got a very angry ghost. You killed the arsonist Black Forest and his subordinates, and timely prevented the fire from spreading to the forest. You received the reward, Wild Transformation. The Necromancer who only wants to plant trees. Part 1, Mark of the Dead 007, Eye of the Jungle and Wind of the Oak Tree, Wilderness Transformation. You have mastered the basic skills of a shapeshifter. Without the need for casting gestures or chanting postures, you can transform into an animal blessed by the wilderness. You can choose one of the following animals as your wilderness form: skunk, raven, dugong dragon. Isn't wilderness transformation a unique skill of druids? Matthew was quite surprised. This must be another trick from the 2 rivaling game systems. In the end, Matthew chose his own wilderness form. This was a consideration to make up for his shortcomings. All 3 animals are small beasts and do not occupy a high ecological position in the food chain, so their combat abilities are very average. The skunk is more agile in some complex mountains or forests. Becoming a skunk might help to escape, but besides that, it has no outstanding advantages. Matthew would not go as far as to squeeze musk for himself after becoming a skunk. The dugong dragon is a small dragon beast similar in physique to a hunting dog. However, this small animal's dragon lineage is more diluted than that of a gnoll. Dragon power and magic are naturally out of the question. The dugong dragon has a certain storage ability. Its belly contains a natural dimensional space. The size of the space is linked to the level of the dugong dragon. A newly born dugong dragon cub has a 1-grid dimensional space, and each time it levels up, it gains an extra grid. Each grid of dimensional space is about the size of a medium pumpkin, which can hold quite a lot of stuff. If it is a choice of animal companion, Matthew would choose the dugong dragon without hesitation, but this is a wilderness transformation. Becoming a moving storage space would actually make Matthew feel insecure. Compared to the above 2 animals, the advantages of the raven are self-evident. That is, it can fly, and it's fast too. Matthew can get his money's worth just by using it for traveling or escaping, not to mention that the raven has an excellent scouting ability. The only drawback of this animal is its low health. The raven only has one hit point. It is easy to be knocked out of the wilderness form by an enemy with anti-air capabilities. There's no such thing as a perfect option. Matthew is quite satisfied with his new ability. In his impression, many powerful mages can turn into a raven. This is a good omen. He checked his taskbar. The reward came from in addition to the new ability he also gained 200 XP, and the task itself didn't change. This means that this is a long-term effective, repeatable task like planting trees. As long as there's a threat, and it's successfully defended, you can get a reward. So can you deliberately bring in threats to repeatedly brush for rewards? Matthew just thought about this idea. After all, he can't determine the system's judgment mode. If he messes up, he'll lose a lot. And on a personality level, Matthew actually doesn't like fighting or doing any kind of overfishing operation. He prefers to plant trees slowly and defend passively. Being able to reap a steady happiness is enough. Chirp chirp. The oak tree fairies appeared. They circled around Matthew, singing high praises of his heroic act of driving away the arsonist. The fairies hate skeleton soldiers, but they really like Matthew. This might be the effect of Matthew's incredibly high natural affinity. You have received the blessing of the fairy princess Lulu. You have gained a semi-permanent state. Eye of the jungle. You have gained a semi-permanent state. Wind of the oak tree. Eye of the jungle. When you are in the jungle, your vision greatly improves, and you can see things behind you. Wind of the oak tree. When you actively approach an oak tree, it will actively release natural energy to heal your wounds and soothe your soul, and your mana recovery speed will also greatly increase. When there is an oak tree fairy living on this oak tree, the effect of wind of the oak tree doubles. Fairy princess. Matthew curiously looked into the pile of fairies. The result was only a flickering shadow. Lulu is very shy. Matthew had only heard her name from other fairies before, but he had never seen what she looked like. Even tonight, Lulu took the initiative to appear and bless Matthew. Matthew couldn't make out her face. Thank you. Matthew expressed his gratitude towards the place where the white light had disappeared. Both were very practical statuses, and the prefix semi-permanent meant that as long as the fairy princess Lulu was still alive, they would remain in effect. According to Matthew's inference, Lulu had just been promoted to fairy princess. She was still very young. There was still a chance for her to become a more powerful fairy queen with a longer lifespan. As long as the oak forest was safe, these two statuses wouldn't be much different from being permanent. Matthew slightly reassured the fairies who had been frightened before. Only then did he start to walk down the hillside. On the edge of the farm, the flames gradually subsided. The skeleton soldiers slowly dragged the bodies of the arsonist and his followers together. Peggy was wiping her bone blade. Not far away, a blue light circle was drifting aimlessly. That was a ghost with a blank expression. Not until Matthew came over did the ghost's eyes gradually brighten up. Matthew, it was you who helped me. The ghost realized what had happened. Matthew raised his wooden staff. A stream of negative energy surged into the ghost's body, and the latter's almost non-existent spirit body regained some gloss. I'm sorry, Mr. Fammer, I couldn't have come earlier. Matthew sighed slightly. Fammer was the owner of this farm. He and his family must have died at the hands of those villains. When Matthew planned to chase the arsonist earlier, he felt a strong resentment from the direction of the farm. This resentment was growing stronger against the fire. It sensed Matthew's presence. So it pleaded with him for a chance to avenge. Matthew naturally wouldn't refuse. Such a strong resentment, if left unchecked, will inevitably give birth to a ruthless ghost. He responded to the other party's plea with a necromancy spell. Eventually, Fammer's spirit body was transformed into a powerful ghost. The strength of a ghost depends on its own resentment. After successful revenge, Fammer's spirit body was greatly weakened. Without external interference, he was about to disappear soon. Yesterday was Anthony's birthday. We spent half a day in the town, bought a lot of things the kids like: desserts, candies, butter bread, and frosted strawberries. I felt something was wrong. When I left the house in the morning, old dog Hunter kept barking, but I found him annoying, so I locked him in the warehouse. I should have known that Hunter wouldn't bark for no reason. He's very spiritual. Those people rushed in directly. They tied up Lena and Anthony, killed the others. I only had a pitchfork in my hand. The other men were also unprepared. We managed to hold off for a while, relying on the warehouse. I couldn't even buy them time to escape to the cellar. I should have known better. Fammer rambled on. Matthew listened in silence. This was a very responsible middle-aged man. Most of what he talked about in the conversation were his family, brothers, and hired farmers. There was a lot of love for life on his face, but even with the negative energy Matthew infused to sustain him, his life as a ghost was coming to an end. Unless, do you want to continue to exist in this form? I can help you. Seeing Fammer's condition getting worse, Matthew couldn't help but mention it. Fammer was taken aback. He shook his head. No, thank you, Matthew, thank you for your kindness, but I don't need it. Lena and the children are waiting for me. I should go with them. Having said that, he glanced in the direction of the east. Matthew looked over thoughtfully. His vision suddenly became gray. Just outside that burnt black stone house, 6 or 7 souls were huddled together. They were looking at Fammer affectionately. That was his family. Matthew also saw that very cute little girl. She looked a bit dull. It seemed that she still didn't know what had happened. I have to go, Matthew. In the cellar behind the mill, there's some of my savings. Please take it. Fammer's figure gradually turned into nothingness. I have only one wish, don't let us be exposed to the wilderness, okay? The gray vision suddenly disappeared, Famar and the other souls vanished in an instant and Matthew's temples were still throbbing violently. You have gained a new ability, Basic Spirit Vision, from your encounter and conversation with the ghost. Basic Spirit Vision. You can glimpse a corner of the ghost world. Note, using this ability will greatly consume mental power. Matthew took a long breath. Under normal circumstances, ghosts can only be seen by people when they become powerful. Realistic forms like ghosts and ghouls, ordinary ghosts cannot be seen by people. Necromancers can use the spell, Spirit Perception, to capture traces of the soul, but Spirit Perception is a third-tier spell. So necromancers below level 8 rarely have ghosts as summons. Famar actually had a chance to become a powerful ghost. It's just that his resentment dissipated too quickly. If Matthew were an evil necromancer, he could force the other party to sign a contract with him, and then not kill the arsonist or keep deceiving Famar that the arsonist was not dead. This way he could have gained a powerful ghost, but given Matthew 1,000 chances that he wouldn't do it. Next came the cleaning up of the battlefield and the tallying of the spoils of war. Matthew first cast his gaze at the body of the arsonist, Blackwood. He walked over, neither politely nor decently. He frisked him. You have obtained the spoils of war. 400 GP and 80 SC, Fire Gel *3, Dragon Oil *2, Burning Bottle *1, Invisibility Ring. Token of Silver Frost Brotherhood *1, Secret Letter *1, Muscle Scroll *6, Heightening Scroll *10 foot. Cleaning up a battlefield is a hard task, but if there are substantial spoils of war to be gained, the situation is different. Clatter. Matthew scooped up a handful of gold coins and poured them into a small clay pot, then placed it in the folding space of his magical bag. The entire process was accompanied by the pleasant sound of rolling metal. There's no sound more pleasing than this. The arsonist had a substantial fortune. Add the share he took from the seller. Matthew had gained over 500 gold coins overnight. In the past 3 years, even when he was financially well off, it was not even a tenth of what he had now. This money can be used to buy a lot of green liquid. Perhaps consider buying more advanced catalyst tools. This means I can plant many more trees this spring. Besides gold coins, the wealth of items on Black Forest also blinded Matthew, a poor rural dweller. Burning gel, fire bottles, dragon oil, these are all good materials for arson. In low-level encounters, these items can exert unimaginable power. Without these items, Matthew would have leveled them long ago. Now, the remaining items were in Matthew's hands. He certainly wouldn't give up using them just because undead naturally fear fire. It's just that the timing of use must be more careful. It would be bad if he hurt his own little brothers. You used the appraisal technique on the invisibility ring, unidentified. The appraisal was successful. Your appraisal proficiency +10. Invisibility ring, first order oddity. Wear this item on your index or middle finger to enter invisibility at any time. Can be used 9 times per day. Attributes, perception +1. Note 1, invisibility cannot move, attack, or cast spells, otherwise the invisibility effect will disappear. Note 2, you still have collision volume in the invisible state. If you collide with others, the invisibility effect will disappear. This is more like a concealment ring. Matthew observed with interest this ring of silver with a black snake pattern. This oddity is far from a real invisibility ring, but it has the advantage of being used more times and requires no casting action. A perception +1 attribute increase is also worthy of a first-order oddity. He polished the ring and then put it on his middle finger. The rest of the stuff is a bit mediocre. The advanced sprint potion is half left. Clean the bottle, and it can be used later. The Silver Frost Brotherhood is an unknown gang organization from which city. The weight of this token is also completely unknown. It is cumbersome to throw it in the pile of clutter. As for those illusion scrolls, it's even more ridiculous. Matthew didn't expect that Black Forest's shiny muscles were actually the effect of illusion. This guy is actually less than 1.7 meters tall. The flesh on his body is also loose. There are no signs of training. Maybe he thinks that looks will help with burning, killing, and looting. Matthew looked up at the arsonist on the ground. Black Forest's face still held the shocked expression of death. The knife wound on his shoulder and the hole in his chest added a bit of terror to the body. On the surface of the body, spots of dark red are still spreading tirelessly. Those are the decay spores that Matthew had previously released into the air. These spores, once inhaled by a person, will quickly generate unbearably itchy decay sacs on their bodies. Decay sacs are creatures of the negative plane. They can replenish negative energy for the necromancer during battle. Matthew currently has the ability of Fester Mastery. When his level is high, he could detonate the decay sacs, control the decay sacs, and control the infected through the decay sacs. This is the terrifying part of necromancers. Black Forest's toughness and immunity are both absurdly high. The decay sacs on his followers have long been finished, but he can always suppress them. It wasn't until after his death that the decay sacs in his body were like fireworks everywhere, crackling. The low, crisp sound is continuous. Seeing this, Matthew immediately paused his reading of the secret letter. I have to deal with this first, otherwise it will be too unsightly. He took a dark green bottle out of his magical bag. Pop, the cork was pulled out. A group of butterflies glowing with a faint green light flew out. They flew around Matthew a few times, then they eagerly landed on Black Forest and a few other bodies. As the patches of green light moved over the surface of the bodies, the dark red spots disappeared by more than half. This is the phantom butterfly. Also a creature from the negative energy plane. Phantom butterflies feed on decay sacs and their spores, making them excellent scavengers. Matthew rarely uses decay sacs. Every time after use he will definitely use phantom butterflies to clean up the surrounding environment. This has nothing to do with the system, it's purely his own bit of cleanliness at work. If the decay spores are allowed to spread, the environment here will soon become similar to the negative energy plane. This is why the environment where most necromancers live is so bad. They are not as particular as Matthew, because phantom butterflies only feed on decay sacs. Once the food is insufficient, they will die quickly. So Matthew's every aftermath is saturated until the mountains and plains are so green that they hurt the eyes. He stopped. Next is the handling of the bodies of the arsonists. This is Matthew's first encounter with such a complete, fresh body. He was a bit nervous handling it. 5 arsonist followers. Except for the first one who was smashed into meat sauce by Peggy, the other 4 can be summoned as zombies. Their physique and frame are good. The scarred face even has a chance to become an elite zombie. Matthew used corpse oil and negative energy secret water to simply preserve their bodies, then he ordered the skeleton soldiers to drag them into his secret cave first. The combat ability of zombies far exceeds that of skeletons. Correspondingly, the process of summoning zombies is much more troublesome than summoning skeletons. He needs to plan for the long term. The body of the arsonist, Hessen, is an excellent material. In White Rock City, such a third-order professional's body would definitely be hyped up by necromancers, because it is an excellent material for making advanced undead summons. The Black Knight, Matthew doesn't have the ability to make Black Knights yet. That's a matter for after level 12. And he hasn't even advanced yet. The Black Knight is still far away. At the moment, the options in front of Matthew are as follows. 1. Store the body and take it out when you have the ability to make a Black Knight. 2. Transport it to White Rock City and sell it at a high price. 3. Turn it into a zombie. There's a chance to cultivate a zombie king. 4. Bury it in the oak forest and see if there's a gift of nature. Exclude 2 and 3. First, Matthew's eyes flickered. He's quite rich now, not in need of money. Moreover, it's too wasteful to make a zombie from a third-order body, and it's not so easy to cultivate a zombie king. There's a 99% chance of a loss. Between the Black Knight and nature's gift, Matthew was torn for a while. In the end, he leaned towards option 4. Not that he coveted Hessen's abilities, more so, he wanted to explore the mechanism of the gift of nature in burying bodies. If it doesn't work, if it's buried and there's no news, it can be dug up again. Just that if the integrity of the body decreases, the combat power of the Black Knight will also be greatly reduced. Once a decision was made, Matthew hesitated no more. He found a geomantic treasure in the oak forest and buried Hessen's body. At the same time, the unfortunate people on the farm were also properly settled. The skeleton soldiers are average in fighting, but they are pretty good at manual labor. After burying the people on a piece of wasteland in the north of the farm, Matthew then had time to read the secret letter. A few minutes later, Matthew's expression changed slightly. To fellow idealists, the odd day change is a foregone conclusion. Eucharis has awakened. He is watching every person on this continent. Given time, his power will make people tremble. The world order is changing. In the near future, fire and sea water will pour into the mainland. Every piece of land we are familiar with will become a hell of no return. I have received reliable news. The southern guardian Ronan is trapped in the star realm. The eastern guardian and the sea monster are both wounded. The western guardian has disappeared years ago, and the northern guardian has never crossed the Tianma Mountains. The withered, the sorcerer, the successor of the path of the dead, the avenger, the red letter hunter, the descendant of voodoo, the arsonist, the conspirator. Don't be afraid, this is the time for us to rise and walk the path of legend. We have established a base in the northeast secret place of Rolling Stone Town, and welcome every brother and sister who has been called to join us. Signature, Fane, Southern Shepherd of the Scourge Church. This is an excerpt from the secret letter. The letter also contains a lot of inflammatory rhetoric. The general idea is to encourage all kinds of evil professions to come out and cause trouble, with a sense of urgency that if they don't cause trouble now, they will never have the chance. Matthew is not interested in these. What he cares about is, the man in the letter claims to have established a base in the north of Rolling Stone Town. He will hold a blood sacrifice to please the void overlord Eucharis. After this blood sacrifice, he will gain supreme power, able to easily flatten Rolling Stone Town, and bring down the fire of heaven, burning everything. Burn everything. Matthew's brow furrowed deeply. This Fane of the cult is somewhat ignorant of life and death. Up to now, the truth is clear. The bloody clothes in the cave, the kidnapping of SIV. Blood flag, the arrival of the arsonist, the intercepted merchants and the ghost's narration, all of this points to this Fane and the Scourge Church behind him. Matthew looked at the taskbar. Sure enough, after he finished reading the secret letter, the task has changed. Follow-up task 2. Maintenance is also important. Description. A new forest can easily be destroyed by an accident. Please be sure to protect your forest. Progress update 1. You killed the arsonist Hessen and his subordinates, and timely stopped the fire from spreading to the forest. You have received the reward Wilderness Transformation, Progress Update 2. You realize that the arrival of Fane and the Scourge Church will not only pose a great threat to the security of Rolling Stone Town, but also to the forest you have painstakingly planted. You can't tolerate this imminent threat. Please eliminate them as soon as possible. Task target, Fane, LV12 Warlock, and his accomplices. Task reward: the spell Rapid Growth and the entry ticket to the Moonlight Society. Rapid Growth? Matthew's face lightened up. This was also a signature spell of the druids. The growth green liquid he had previously used for planting trees was a potionized version of this spell because it had been processed into a potion. So its effect would be discounted. If he could master this spell proficiently, his ability in tree planting would rival that of a genuine druid. Wild Transformation and Rapid Growth are both signatures of druids, so it seems that the rewards provided by the maintenance is also important. Task are druid side abilities? No, it might have nothing to do with the task, but with the means of completing the task. Whether it's dealing with arsonists, or the deeper scourge cult, bloodshed is inevitable. So, is the system's reward pattern operating in reverse? The peaceful act of tree planting, which loves nature, is rewarded with a bone dragon from the necromantic system, and when it comes to killing and confrontation, the reward turns to the druid side. Matthew pondered with interest. The current sample is too small to draw conclusions, but that doesn't prevent him from making bold assumptions. He glanced at the bottom of the taskbar. The Tai Chi symbol had undergone a new change. The green light on the left had completely exceeded 2/3. It's not far from being full, just don't know what will happen when it's full. It's worth mentioning the right side. Although the gray light is still faint, but compared to the previous stagnant state, it's much better. Matthew has sharp eyes. He could see the gray light at the bottom trying hard to surge upwards. With a whoosh, the light rushed to the 1/3 position in one breath. Heart of Nature and Path of the Dead. Matthew guessed, the rapid increase of the gray light should be related to tonight's battle. The operation mechanism behind it still needs to be explored, but not now. Near the farm, people have already discovered the disaster here. People are coming from the town and the countryside. Matthew led the team to retreat to the oak forest. He sent the skeletons back to the hole. Then he said to Peggy, "I'm afraid you'll have to walk back on your own." Peggy exclaimed, "You're letting me walk alone in the dark? I'll be scared." Matthew coughed. "Then should I summon another skeleton to accompany you?" Peggy grumbled, "You don't give overtime pay and I have to walk home by myself. You necromancers really do have hearts corroded by negative energy." Matthew shrugged. "The time for reverse summoning has passed. I'm not some big shot, you have to understand, Peggy." Peggy softened a bit. All right, I'll go back alone, but next time I work overtime, you at least have to give me a soul crystal. When we signed the contract, you promised me the moon." After saying goodbye to the chatty towering skeleton, Matthew gazed to the north. The ghost of the merchant had mentioned the chaos in Ghost Hag's fort, combined with the content of the secret letter. The base of the Scourge cult is likely to be near Ghost Hag's fort, if not within it. Time is pressing. Matthew planned to eliminate the threat as soon as possible. So he took a leap. Whoosh, a crow swept over the branches under the moonlight, headed northeast. The divination results are out. The enemy's position has been confirmed. It's in a valley near Ghost Hag's fort. In the Lord's Hall. A fully armed, thin-faced middle-aged man calmly surveyed the surroundings. Some were stung by his fiery gaze and awkwardly moved their heads away. Others excitedly lifted their heads to meet his gaze. They craved a chance to be recognized by the Lord of the Blood Flag. "Braid and Anne, you each lead a team of horsemen to flank from the southwest. Be quick, but also be careful of ambushes. Mr. Zeal, please continue to contact the senior wizards of White Rock City or Rapid City. If anyone is willing to help, agree to any terms." Just as I suspected, our enemies are not some robbers and bandits who have been blinded by money. They are a group of madmen, scum, and cultists. Just as I said before, the Blood Flag family will never compromise with these evil scum. Your task is to kill every villain you see. That's all. In the quiet hall, the voice of the Lord of the Blood Flag was loud and clear. One by one, the harsh and tough orders fell. Those who received specific tasks were all delighted. Gradually, however, some people's faces showed confusion. "My lord, won't our aggressive actions provoke them? After all, Miss Sifu is indeed in their hands." A young man in a robe, exceptionally handsome, spoke up. This also voiced the doubts of others present. The Blood Flag family was indeed known for its tough stance against enemies, but the problem now is, the young lady is in the hands of those villains. According to the Lord of the Blood Flag's approach. Sifu's chances of survival are probably frighteningly low. Everyone looked at the Lord of the Blood Flag in confusion. He coldly said, "It's precisely because Sifu is in their hands that we have to do this." He didn't explain much. Instead, he said to the handsome young man, "Mr. Zeal, in addition to contacting senior wizards, please also pay attention to the clues we found before. Sifu could not have been kidnapped out of thin air. You should understand what I mean." Zeal nodded solemnly. "Ladies and gentlemen, please act. Use your fastest speed, use your strongest strength, I implore you." The Lord of the Blood Flag waved his hand. The people in the Lord's Hall dispersed one after another. In the end, only the Lord of the Blood Flag was left alone. He walked to a window. After a while, an owl flew in. "Honestly, I don't quite understand you men of the Blood Flag family. You're clearly worried about your daughter, but you're making decisions that might harm her." The owl spoke doubtfully. The Blood Banner Lord drew a deep breath. Before everyone, my identity is always the head of the Blood Banner, not anything else. Every word I say represents the family, and the Blood Banner family never compromises with evil. That is our motto. The owl was even more puzzled. So why did you call me over? The Blood Banner Lord said, I know you can turn into a giant eagle. The owl nodded, yes. Take me to the witch's castle, the favor you owe me, consider it repaid, the Blood Banner Lord said decisively. The owl pondered for a moment, nodded and said okay. But it seems that the head of the Blood Banner family should not risk his life. Hearing this, the Blood Banner Lord clenched his sword at his waist. Now, I am Siv's father. An hour later, a raven flew over the barren mountain under the moonlit night. From the distance occasionally came one or two ghostly wails. The witch's castle stood at the high point of the barren mountain. The fog around it never dissipated all year round. Even under the high-hanging moon tonight, Matthew could only vaguely glimpse one or two outlines of the old castle. Staring at the mountain fog, he had a bad feeling that if there were always a pair of gloomy eyes in the fog staring at him. It is said that before the castle was abandoned, it was the residence of a human hero, and it had been prosperous and noisy. Unfortunately, after a strange disaster, a large number of people living in the castle died, and the survivors fled in a hurry. No one could clearly say what had happened. Later, it was not that no one had tried to explore, but those adventurers who dared to enter the castle gate never came out. They were like being swallowed by the fog. The last time someone explored the castle was a famous necromancer from White Rock City. He somehow got the news and publicly declared that the eternal law was hidden in the castle and insisted on entering it. In the end, the necromancer was no exception, and when he explored the castle, he had a fierce battle with a group of old witches from the lower world outside the gate, so the castle was also called the Witch's Castle. Recalling the words he had chatted with Brad in his mind, Matthew suddenly had a feeling of shuddering. His perception told him, this castle is not something he can explore now. Fortunately, his destination tonight is not in the Witch's Castle. Avoiding the eerie fog, the raven tilted its body to the west. In a short while, there was sporadic firelight at the foot of the remaining mountains in front. It was a dangerous valley. There were people guarding the entrance of the valley, but the guards' attitude seemed rather loose. Matthew naturally lowered his altitude. By the way, he glanced at the taskbar. Task progress updated. You have discovered the Necromancer camp. Matthew didn't rush into it. The target of the task is a necromancer. This profession usually has high perception. A suddenly appearing raven is very likely to startle the snake. He flew low around the entrance of the valley and cleverly stopped in the bushes next to the mountain road. There have been fights here, and not just one. There were piles of corpses on the mountain road. There were humans. There were also smaller humanoid creatures. It's lizard monsters. Matthew made a judgment based on the knowledge he had mastered. The wilderness is convenient. For necromancers, unowned corpses naturally belong to the virtuous. He decisively turned back into a human and began to summon skeletons. The sound of the curse and Matthew's magic power infused the messy corpse pile under the moonlit night with a thread of mysterious color. One by one, the skeletons stood up from the blood pool. Their status was very average. The soul fire in their skulls was sometimes bright and sometimes dim, and the bones on their bodies were even more scattered. Some were even a mixture of lizard monsters and humans, which looked very strange and terrifying. These are the lowest level cannon fodder skeletons. They can't compare with the elite Matthew hid in the cellar, but it's enough to scare the layman. The obvious magic fluctuations of the necromancer summoning spell soon attracted attention from the direction of the camp. A fat man over 2 meters tall came over with a group of henchmen. He was covered in heavy armor. Behind him, 2 groups of people were holding a huge battle axe and a meteor hammer for him respectively. Hey! Necromancer! What are you doing? The fat man looked at Matthew with some apprehension. Matthew is still summoning skeletons to himself. Are you blind? I'm giving these spirits a new life. The fat man was angry. They are my people. Even if they die, they are my corpses. Matthew arrogantly said, not anymore. Bang! The fat man was so angry that he stomped his foot. The already loose mountain road began to shake slightly. Do you want to be my enemy? Matthew looked at him with a smile. Your body fat can refine a lot of corpse oil, but I won't consider letting you become my servant, because your skeleton must have been overworn to support your body in your lifetime, and I don't like defective products. Kill him. Just as the fat man was about to make a move, a majestic voice suddenly came from the camp. Enough. The fat man was so angry that his whole body was shaking. Fen, let me kill him. He dared to mock my body. No one dares to do that. However, the henchman next to him quickly dispersed. A man in a silver robe appeared in front of Matthew. He looked about 30 years old, with blonde hair and blue eyes, handsome features, and his temperament seemed like a righteous person. State your purpose, necromancer, or don't blame us for doing it. Fen looked down at Matthew. Are you Fen? Matthew was also examining him. I killed an arsonist and found this. I'm interested in your career, so I found here. He threw the secret letter over. Fen glanced at the secret letter, suddenly laughed. You killed my friend and dared to come to the door? His face, which was originally leaning towards a strong and upright look, also became a bit eerie because of this smile. If that waste can be called a friend by you, then I should be greatly disappointed. Matthew said bluntly. Fen laughed. He was once, but not anymore. You killed him, so you replace him as a part of our career, that's reasonable. Come in first, my friend, as long as you are interested in the great cause of the Scourge Church, we will definitely get along. I've had a bone dragon for a long time. Thanks to the stereotypical image of the Necromancer and Matthew's superb acting skills, he successfully entered the Warlock's camp, but he did not let his guard down. From beginning to end, he never walked side by side with Fine or the Fat Man. He mingled in the center of the skeleton soldiers, following them all the way. The fat man named Anglais became increasingly disgusted with Matthew. However, Fine didn't say much about this. Instead, he said that this was the typical behavior of a lone necromancer. Evil, harsh, cunning, cautious. Not to be trifled with. The entrance to the valley was narrow, but surprisingly spacious inside. Matthew found some scattered pottery and utensils inside, obviously not made by human hands. This used to be the lair of a group of lizard creatures, Fine explained with a warm smile, seeing the confusion in Matthew's eyes. I originally wanted to invite them to join our cause, but their shamans did not appreciate it, so I had to kill them all. Matthew lowered his voice. No matter, they had the opportunity to contribute their part. Fine looked at the few short bones in the skeleton soldiers, a look of approval in his eyes. That's true, I have long wanted to find a necromancer to join, but the necromancers of White Rock City have been restrained. They are too gentle, like wolf cubs raised in a sheepfold for many years. Even if someone removes their chains for them, all they get is a dog. Fine's words were a test. This cunning warlock obviously hadn't let his guard down with Matthew. Matthew replied disdainfully, you can't suppress the pace of a necromancer's pursuit of truth. You only see the surface of White Rock City. Fine smiled meaningfully. Perhaps, it seems you know more about White Rock City than I do. Matthew just grunted. He did not continue to delve into this topic, but chose to take the initiative. Who is your master? As soon as the words fell, the fat man Anglais came over in anger. You are offending the dignity of my master. Matthew stood his ground. Well, as far as I know, there are many impostors in the Outer Planes. They are pitifully weak but act as if they are omnipotent. You know what I mean? Fine. You are not the first warlock I know. Warlock. As the name suggests, it is a relatively evil profession. The power of a warlock usually comes from the master they serve. These masters are mostly non-native, exceptionally powerful beings from the Outer Planes. They could be fairies from the arcane wilderness, great evil spirits from the lower planes, twilight beings buried in the star realm, or divine monsters sealed under the bridge of all beings. The strength of a warlock depends on how much power their master can project in this plane and the degree of favor they have for their warlock. Usually, the master would not allow his warlock to be too weak. But there are exceptions. Just as Matthew just said, the quality of creatures from the Outer Planes is uneven, and there are inevitably a few impostors among a group of strong men. Some warlocks are deceived by outer creatures. They pay a lot but gain little power. Such cases are not uncommon. You do have some insight. Fine still didn't get angry. He said with a chuckle, I can't tell you my master's name yet, but once you join our cult, all the answers you want to know will be revealed. Not convenient to reveal, then it can rule out the void overlord Eucharis mentioned in the secret letter. Sometimes what a warlock does is not to please his master, but to please the person his master wants to please. This suggests that the master behind him is not of high rank. Matthew thought quickly. He still maintained a sharp and harsh attitude on the outside. He looked around. Your cult? Forgive my bluntness, these people don't look like they can accomplish anything. They seem to have no faith in the cult. There are about 40 or 50 people in and out of the camp. This is already a large scale for a warlock team, but Matthew noticed that these people did not seem to be fanatical cultists. They looked spiritless. Fine blinked. They are just some helpers I found in a hurry. Some of them are convicts I bought from Black Lake Port, and others are bandit groups I incorporated. Mr. Matthew, it's only natural that you look down on them, but on the road to accomplishing our cause, we always need some characters like this. Matthew snorted, his disdain more obvious. You'd better show some sincerity, not waste my time here. All right, Fine spread his hands helplessly. I'll take you to meet someone. I'm preparing to hold a ceremony soon. She is the key. Deep in the valley, in a large tent, Matthew met Sif. She was a young girl with auburn hair and a pretty face. Her skin was very clean, with only a few faint freckles on the left side of her nose, giving a playful and mischievous impression. Now she was wrapped in a thick blanket, seemingly unconscious. Who is this girl? Matthew asked knowingly. The only daughter of the Blood Flag family. Fine raised his head proudly. You should know what kind of bloodline flows in her. As long as the ceremony is successful, we can summon the sky fire to destroy everything. Matthew was silent. He didn't really know what was special about the Blood Flag family's bloodline. He tried to probe. How did you catch her? Fine didn't get carried away. That's something you'll only know after you join the cult. What do you think? Sir, I have shown enough sincerity, and you haven't even told me your name. Matthew made up a name on the spot. You can call me Rog. What will I get if I join you? Fine nodded. So it's Mr. Rog. Our mission is to awaken the scourge through a great ceremony. Each time we succeed, our master will bestow rewards and secrets. As long as you join, these blessings will also be yours. After you break through to the 4th tier, our master may grant you a bone dragon. A bone dragon? I already have one. Matthew thought to himself that this sorcerer was even better at painting pies in the sky than he was, yet, he couldn't help but show signs of interest. So, what do I need to do? Fane's eyes twinkled. Just a small test. Since you were able to kill Hassan, you must have mastered it, right? Death Veil, a 12th level Necromancer spell. Its effect is akin to a small-scale, weakened version, where the Death Veil covers all creatures will have their life energy quickly drained, then, one by one, they will be turned into undead. I can. Matthew frowned and said, but the effect of this spell isn't very good. Even a disabled person has a chance to escape from the range of the veil with sheer will to survive. This is the awkward part about the Death Veil. It sounds powerful, like a mini undead scourge, but compared to the omnipresent instant death judgment of the undead scourge, the killing efficiency of the Death Veil is frustratingly low. Even a necromancer with the intent to indiscriminately kill would not bother learning this spell. What if they stand still for you to kill? Fane asked, a smile playing on his lips. A thought struck Matthew, and he immediately nodded. Well, that would work. Great. Fane pulled open the tent door, gesturing for the two of them to step outside. Once outside the camp, he called out loudly, angry. Call everyone here. He then turned to Matthew and whispered, prepare the spell. Matthew retorted, are you insane? Casting a spell in front of so many people, they'd tear me apart. No, trust me, they won't. Fane stated decisively. You've done something to them, Matthew questioned, but why would you do that? These people might be useless, but they cost you a fair bit of money, didn't they? You seem to be asking too many questions. For the first time, a hint of annoyance flickered across Fane's face. As they spoke, everyone had gathered, including the two guards who were guarding the tent where Sif was held. Suddenly, Fane let out a sharp shriek. 15 seconds later, everyone clutched their heads in pain. Then, one by one, they fell to their knees. At the same time, their skin began to sprout thin, whip-like filaments. These gray filaments floated in the air, emitting a strong aura of evil. Start, Mr. Rogue. Fane shot Matthew a sinister look. Angry. Get the girl and prepare my carriage. He called out again. Matthew glanced around. He noticed that besides the large tent where Sif was being held, there were a number of smaller tents scattered around the valley. These small tents were not for living, they seemed to be hiding something. Crafted abominations, Death Veil. Matthew suddenly understood. He wants to create a batch of real wraiths here. Unlike the purely negative energy-filled undead, the wraiths, infused with the elements of sorcery, were even more terrifying and evil. You're leaving. Matthew pulled out his staff, his gaze fixed on Fane. Yes, before you arrived, I received a secret message. The Blood Banner family has reacted faster than I expected. Unfortunately, I must postpone the ceremony and abandon this base. Fane explained coldly. They are on their way here, and of course I have to prepare some surprises for them. If you don't take action, these crafted abominations will only cause them minor trouble, but if we can create real wraiths in the material plane, not only could we make the Blood Banner family suffer a great loss, but we might even please my master. Mr. Rogue, out of politeness and respect, I have told you everything I should and shouldn't have. Now, please don't disappoint me. With that, his right hand rested on his sword, his left hand held a spellbook engraved with an eerie wolf head. I see, I understand. Matthew smiled lightly, then raised his wooden staff and began to chant in a low voice. Fane retreated to a distance he deemed safe. His face was filled with caution as he watched Matthew. Until that moment, a strong sense of warning surged in his heart. I forgot to tell you, even though I'm a necromancer, I'm actually a good guy. Matthew smiled faintly. Also, Bone Dragon, I've had it for a long time. As his words fell, a silent roar stole all the sound from the valley. And the distorted air. A colossal creature made entirely of bones descended from the sky. The faces of Fane and Angry were filled with horror as they tried to turn their bodies. Unfortunately, they couldn't. A regal aura spread out like a stone tossed into a calm pond. Your summon, Aphelios, has used the ability Dragon's Might. Sorcerer Fane and Warrior Angry have fallen into a state of stun, weakness, and fear. Duration: 12 seconds.